Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hi, Fahrusha. Kate Valentine here.
Hey, Kate. It's great to see you here and hear you here. And we are unbelievably at our 62nd show.
Okay. And today's date is February 13,
2018.
All right.
We're twins.
Yeah.
So we've slated. And now we're about to introduce our very, very interesting guest. I'm very impressed with this gentleman because he doesn't quit. He
does
written
not.
14 books. If I know him, he's probably even working secretly,
Frantically.
frantically or feverishly was what I was going to say on his 15th. The person is Preston Dennett. And Preston has written, as I say, 15 books. He started in 1986 that when he found that people around him were having unexplained encounters. And he just interviews people by the hundreds. He's a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, paranormal researcher in general, and he says he's the author of 20 books. Okay, I made a mistake. I thought it was only 14. But let us welcome, with a loud clapping of the hands, because I'm used to working on stage sometimes, Preston Dennett. Hi, Preston.
Hi, Kate. Hi, Fahrusha. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to speak to you again. A very interesting new book, or newish book, I guess, Inside UFOs. Actually, I was just reading one quick story, and I almost didn't listen to what Fahrusha was saying. I got so involved with it. On those people that you interviewed for these type of episodes or experiences, the one thing that always impressed me on the UFO show is that everyone was absolutely honest about what had happened to them, and yet people around them would scoff at them. And it's nice to have someone like you that writes about these experiences at face value.
Yeah, it's amazing. People, one of the first things they often say is like, I've never talked to anyone about this, or
yeah,
I'm not crazy, I'm not on drugs, I've got a good education, all these various caveats. But yeah, it takes them a while to find someone who's willing to listen sometimes.
I found these stories, the 10 of them, in the book Inside UFOs, The True Accounts of Contact by Preston Dennett, and I'm looking for the publisher so I can announce that. Who's the publisher, Preston? Blue Giant Books. Okay. I found that every one of these stories was interesting and amazing, and I believe these people because we're both experiencers, and we both believe that these things happen here. And the one story I will start with my criticism, which is a criticism you made at the end of the book anyway, so it's not news to you, and it isn't a criticism of you in any way, but just the one woman who was regressed and then she remembered a whole lot of stuff. I don't think that she's lying in any way, but I also am very iffy about hypnotic regression, because that can implant memories as well if you're not really careful. But I do not under any circumstances think that she's lying, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah, I kind of wanted to stay away from hypnotic regression in this particular book because there is a little bit of controversy surrounding it, false memory syndrome and what have you. I actually do believe it works. I know it does. I've seen it. I totally support people who want to undergo regressive hypnosis, but I generally don't recommend it unless a person is having, say, anxieties, if they're just like having nightmares, can't sleep, this sort of thing, or if they're just dead set on finding out what happened on a specific missing time incident or a very, but if you start going fishing, and just, because, I think there's a danger there of, false memories and things like this.
I don't think that most UFO investigators are, quote unquote, trying to implant false memories, but I am quite clear that some of them, and I don't, want to mention any names or anything like that, some of them may be leading the witness a little bit, as the courtroom saying goes, don't lead the witness. So my caveat to our listeners here, and I think you'd probably both agree with me, both Kate and Preston probably would agree, that if you're going to get regressed, you want to go to someone whose primary work is, maybe psychotherapist who does hypnotism, or not somebody whose sole interest in life is UFOs, because try as they may, it may be a little bit leading the witness. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. It's not as easy to lead witnesses sometimes as you might think. I've certainly tried to do it, and they'll stick to their story if they're, really sincere about it. But yeah, I think it is a danger, and that's why in this particular book, I think there are 2 cases which did use hypnosis, but all the others are fully conscious memories. But I do support it, because what I found is that people who recall their stuff under hypnotic regression, their stories match what other people have recalled consciously.
Uh-huh.
So it's clearly, it works. I mean, the police use it as a tool. The FBI, it's been used with all kinds of trauma victims. So I know it does work.
Well, what makes
I just wanted to stay away from it because of the controversy.
Well, honestly,
I want people to really know that, that these are fully conscious experiences people are having, not hypnotic recalled experiences.
Well, initially when people started to report their experiences, they were all reported under hypnosis. So your book is different in that you have conscious experiences and that they actually remember something that happened to them.
And it's really excellent. You have 2 different former Navy fellows who had experiences, and I believe out of the 10 people, you also had 2 people who saw mantis type ETs rather than Nordic types or grays, and so that it's very interestingly varied there. And you've had almost as many women as men, so it's a well-balanced book, Preston.
Yeah, that's what I kind of tried to do. I didn't want it to be another book about gray type abductions called Under Hypnosis. No, there's a wide variety of ETs people are seeing, and I really wanted to reflect that. It's not just grays, and for that matter, it's not just Nordic or human-looking. There's a number of praying mantis, like you mentioned, and some very unusual humanoids. There's one case in the book involving a lady from Nebraska, and she saw a figure a type of ET I'd never heard of before. In fact, that's why she contacted me. She wanted to know, has anyone reported this? And I had to tell her no. The type of ET she saw was a humanoid, but it was, I don't even know how to describe it. 9 feet tall, had orange kind of straw-like hair, a very broad face, human-looking, but clearly not human, not your typical Nordic, certainly, which are usually described as being, very good-looking and almost genetically perfect, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of really unique cases, and that's what I really was excited about this book, is showing people the actual variety of ETs people are really seeing.
Well, you wonder, or at least I do, the kind of sort of Star Trek kind of universe that may be out there with different civilizations roaming in space, or conversely, different beings roaming in a parallel reality.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what kept me out of the whole UFO research, the whole field for a while. Is it seemed very much Star Trek-y. I kind of wanted ETs to have, I don't know, fangs and tentacles and be just something really unusual. But you're kind of stuck with the evidence. This is what people are seeing, are human-like figures. And yeah, it is very much like Star Trek in some ways. I think perhaps, Gene Roddenberry was inspired by ETs, or a lot of other science fiction writers, perhaps. I know that ET contact is not always just, being visited or taken on board. It can be through the dream state. It can be telepathic. It can be sort of an inspired type thing. So, I think that there's some truth in Star Trek in terms of, there's things I've heard on Star Trek which turn up in these UFO accounts, like being beamed on board, or the medical technology where we are able, in Star Trek, there's these little beams of light that can cure a cut, heal a cut or an incision. And that turns up quite a bit in actual accounts. So there's sort of a bleed through there.
Yeah.
But we're stuck with these human-looking ETs, or largely human. They've got eyes, nose, mouth, arms, legs. So that's, I think, sort of the universal form. Probably 99% of the accounts I get are some type of humanoid form.
Interesting.
Biologists say that if you're going to technologically evolve, you do need binocular vision. You do need capability of handling things. You have to stand upright. You have to be able to see around you. You have to be able to survive in a hostile environment. And running a computer game as to what life form would match all this, they almost always come up humanoid. So, and usually computer forms mimic life, and I think that's what we're going to expect. But have you yourself ever experienced anything, Preston?
I have, actually. Not until I started doing UFO research did I really experience anything, and certainly nothing to the level of the people I've interviewed. As far as I know, I don't think I've been taken on board. I don't recall that. I've never had missing time. But I have to tell you, it wasn't long after I started doing research into this subject, I started having sightings pretty regularly.
Wow.
And some were close up and interactive. One always comes to mind is one of the first sightings I had. And this was one night I was just out of my mind trying to deal with this subject. It really hit me like a ton of bricks. It was not good news. I was really upset. I had to change my whole worldview. And I was discussing it with my brother and my sister-in-law, who kind of really helped me through it in the beginning, certainly. And I'm driving home one evening. This is around late July in 1991 or so, 1992. And this is in Woodland Hills, California, very densely populated area. And I see this, I thought it was a bird at first, but it came right up to my car, and it wasn't a bird. It was a ball of light. I'm like, it's not a golf ball. This is not a firecracker. What's going on? It came right up to my window, you guys. Like a foot, 2 feet away, right up to my windshield, scooted back and forth a couple of times, maybe 3, darted down a little bit and went straight up through the canopy in the trees, straight up into outer space.
Wow.
Just this, it targeted me. It absolutely came right towards me, looked at me a couple of feet away, and took off.
How big was it, Preston?
It was about the size of a golf ball, and not super bright, but definitely a glowing white orb. And yeah, very close. And that's.
Did you sort of get the feeling you were being probed or looked at?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's what startled you.
That's not the last time that happened. That happened again on the freeway of all places.
Wow.
And I'm looking around, and the cars, they're not seeing this. It's very brief, but this thing just drops down right in front of my car. And I'm going like 60, 70 miles an hour. And on my way to a UFO meeting, by the way. Stephen Greer and Richard Boylan and a bunch of other contactees.
Wow.
So I felt like, they're probing me.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll have a sighting like this. And sometimes real close up.
These
I
orbs.
don't think
I was just going to say
usually
these orbs seem to be attracted to certain persons. I had a friend who has orbs around them all the time, and twice when I was in her presence, I also experienced orbs. And I've experienced orbs on my own, but I found it to be startling that she has a lot of them around her. And two of like maybe my 4 orb sightings, I was with her. So they do seem to be attracted to certain people, the orbs.
Yeah, I think they started to take notice of me when I was doing this UFO research, because I never had anything growing up. And I looked into this, and that this is actually not unusual among UFO researchers or investigators, and certainly contactees. But people who do UFO research, Bud Hopkins had a sighting, right? Brad Steiger, Whitley Strieber, the guy who investigated his case, Ed Conroy, never had any sightings at all until he started researching Whitley Strieber's case, and actually ended up having a full-on missing time abduction type experience.
Oh my goodness! Now, who was this person? Because I'm of all the names that you've mentioned thus far, it's the one name that I'm not particularly familiar with. Ed Conroy, did you say?
Yeah, Ed Conroy was a mainstream journalist and heard about Whitley Strieber's story, and was like, I'm going to expose this guy as a hoaxer. He probably is, and found out no, he wasn't hoaxing.
No.
Yeah, this is sort of a pattern I've noticed. Actually, he labeled the term UFO investigator's disease. Once you start looking into this stuff, they start looking into you.
Well, since you had no early experiences, what triggered off your investigating? Just general interest, or?
No, I was repulsed by the subject. I really was. And I was pretty rude about it. And really? I apologize to all those people in my past. My brother, I remember he came running in, I saw a UFO. And we all just looked at him like, yeah, right. Sure you did. But what happened was there was this report on the news. This is in November of 1986. And a pilot flying his jet, a commercial airliner, over Alaska, saw a UFO. His whole crew did. It was on their radar. They followed it for many miles for nearly an hour. The FAA said it appeared on their radar, though they later denied it and called it split images. But it's a great case. Captain Kenji Tsuroshi is the pilot. And I thought, my God, this pilot has got to be lying. He's hoaxing. He's misperceiving. There's just no way he's seeing an alien spaceship. I would have known if UFOs were real by now. I mean, it was never mentioned all my years in school, all through college, not a word of this. Only thing I ever heard was on In Search Of, maybe, or various little kind of giggly segments on the news. In fact, when they talked about this pilot sighting on the news, there was no detail to it. They just said, this pilot thought he saw a UFO. And they kind of moved on, laughed nervously, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. This pilot is putting his reputation on the line.
Indeed.
I brought it up. I kind of made this mistake of bringing it up at work. Here in my office, actually, I work as a bookkeeper. And this lady I worked with for years and years and years says, I saw a UFO. I'm like, really? I knew she wasn't lying to me. I'd known her for way too long. She's like, yeah, me and my whole family saw it. It darted around. I actually ended up talking to her family to confirm it. And while she's explaining this, in walks Dorothy. And Dorothy's like, another lady I love and trust and have worked with for years. She's like, UFOs. One followed me home from the library, me and my mom and my best friend.
Oh, boy.
Like, really? She's like, yeah, Preston, it's so weird. We lived 5 minutes from the library. We left at exactly 9. We didn't get home till 10:15. It's really strange. We lost like an hour of time.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Yeah, this was before, Bud Hopkins' book, Missing Time, had been picked up by a major publisher. And what really wasn't a super popular subject. Whitley Strieber's book hadn't come out yet. So this was like, God, it really hit home for me. I found out family members were having encounters. Some really good friends had had encounters. One had missing time. My sister-in-law had a face-to-face encounter with gray-type ETs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh, gosh, I don't believe this. Earth is being invaded by ETs, and no one's talking about it.
So you were
that's kind of how it all
surrounded by
began.
them. You were surrounded by all these experiencers, and you yourself hadn't, up until the glowing red light, the orbs, you yourself haven't had any experiences, but all around you.
Yeah, I felt scandalized. I'm like, you guys, why didn't you tell me?
What's wrong with me? What am I,
I
chopped
was
liver?
mad. I really was. And they're like, well, you wouldn't have believed me, would you? I'm like, well, no.
Well, do you think perhaps that the bad feelings around people experiencing UFOs is starting to fade a little bit? Do you think that it's a little bit more accepted today than it was in previous times?
100% yes.
Yeah,
When I first started researching, I'd always say, oh, can I use your name if I write about your sighting? No, please don't. I'll lose my job. And now most people say, oh, no problem. And if I get an opportunity to go on television, back in the day, they would always bring up someone next to me who was a debunker.
Right.
Not someone who's, a scientist really, but just someone there to bash you personally.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they do.
that doesn't really happen anymore. I mean, it does, but not nearly as much.
Yeah, they look really silly, the debunkers on TV.
I agree. And they will use any flaccid argument that they can find, and it's an embarrassment. They're an embarrassment to science when they won't see something that may be a new phenomena. But I am interested to just talk a little bit more here about your book. And because we here, as I had said, are all experiencers of various types, it's not hard to believe the majority of these people and the majority of what they have to say. So I want to just look at a few of the things that I noticed were common denominators in many of the experiences. And that is that even though some people seem to have had harm done to them, it didn't seem as though, by and large, that many of these people felt that the others were trying to harm them, and yet they didn't feel as though the others were particularly warm and cuddly. On the other hand, that they were like sort of have the demeanor of scientists performing experiments on somebody slightly smarter than a lab rat, in that they did bother to communicate with them mentally.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of an enigma. I always ask people, well, do you think these guys are hostile? And almost no one says that. I haven't found any evidence of what I would call sadistic behavior or Nazi-like torture. They're not trying to hurt people. They're not trying to scare them. That's not their agenda at all.
Yeah, I think they're
but on
just
the other
indifferent, really.
Yeah, I mean, each case is individual. I've talked to people who say, no, flat out, these are my friends. I feel like they're my family. I love them more than my own family. These guys, I love them. And others are like, they weren't, they kind of treated me like a lab rat. One lady in the book, she was actually healed of a sort of a hypoglycemia type illness. And they didn't hurt her at all, but she says, they were kind of arrogant. They didn't really care about my feelings. They just sort of carted me around like, I felt a little bit like a lab rat, is what she said. But they didn't hurt her. They healed her.
One thing that I've found disturbing about your book and several other encounters I've read about in other literature is the idea that people start off by seeing Nordic types, and then they have to interact with grays as well. And as an experiencer who has had contact with Nordic types. I've never seen a gray, and I don't think that I'm really looking forward to seeing any grays. So I find that aspect where Nordic contact then turns into contact with grays, I find that to be kind of, let's say, frightening, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that Nordics and Greys are that far removed from each other, or for that matter, from us. Because what we're seeing, a lot of these Gray-type ETs have said flat out to their contactees, like, oh, one day you will look just like us, or we are you and you are us, and we are related. And they are producing these hybrid babies. They're interbreeding with us.
So it
Grays
does have
and
to be the
Nordics
same
are
species.
often seen together. That's not unusual. I think that their relationship is probably a little bit closer than a lot of people realize.
Well, maybe they're sort of like caterpillars and butterflies. Maybe one evolves into the other,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
That's
no, we
one of
don't know. That's the interesting thing about this. There's so much that you don't know. So, if Preston, if you were offered an invitation to come on board, do you think you'd go?
Absolutely. That's just me. I definitely would. I don't think UFOs are something to fear. I don't think there's something to be afraid of. I think if you look at the evidence, overall, their agenda is very positive. And I've looked really deeply into this. When someone's taken on board, the most common thing is being physically examined. But beyond that, they're given messages. And these messages fall into 3 different types, and they're very positive. Generally speaking, when ETs talk to people, they're giving warnings. Warnings about nuclear proliferation, warnings about future environmental destruction, warnings about pollution, overpopulation, violence, this sort of thing. That's the most common message. Second to that would be alternative energy. Over and over again, people are taken on board. After being examined, they're taken to the engine room and said, we don't run our ships on fossil fuels. You guys don't need to use fossil fuels. It's destroying your planet. You can run things on electromagnetics like we do and actually show them how these ships work. Got a case just like that in the book.
Yes,
The Navy engineer, great witness. They took him to the engine room and had a big, long discussion about this. So this is pretty common, and I'm thinking that this sort of shows the ET's ultimate agenda. And the third category would be healing, and this turns up again and again and again, or spirituality. People are given messages about alternative healing or psychic development,
Absolutely.
past lives, out-of-body travel, this sort of thing. And they come away from their experiences feeling they can heal, or with a psychic explosion of talent. Some start channeling, some start giving readings. One guy, he became a water dowser. So this is something I see quite a bit. There's a very strong spiritual transformation. And again, I think this speaks to why they're here and what their agenda is. And it's very positive.
Yes. I think for me personally, the terror that I experienced was a loss of volition. Not being able, being paralyzed, and the loss of volition is in itself terrifying, but nothing bad happened to me, and mostly good things happened to me as a result of it. Just to go back to the fellow who was the Navy engineer and the machine that he ended up making and how the bicycle wheel was able to turn. I wonder if if you've seen this machine, if he's done anything more with it, if you followed up on that.
No, he was quite elderly when I interviewed him, and really eager to get this story out before he passed away. And he sat on his experience for many, many years. Because back when he had his experience, I believe it was back in the early 1980s, this wasn't nearly as popular a subject. And he was a little bit nervous about it and didn't even come out to his family for many, many years. But yeah, after being taken on board, taken to the engine room and shown this engine, they told him that he could build this if he wanted to. He has the technological know-how to build something like this. And that's what he did. He went to a hardware store, got a bunch of magnets. Magnets turn up again and again in these sort of accounts, counter-rotating magnets. I don't think we fully understand the electromagnetic spectrum like these guys do, certainly. And he was able to build this kind of a perpetual motion device.
Wow.
Which actually worked. I mean, his family was really impressed. He said this thing spun for a couple of weeks. He just started going and keep on going.
Interestingly.
Yeah, not unique.
It's not unique because this is something that I've never said on the air before. But my father, who was also an experiencer, did start to. He was a shipyard worker and a chemical company worker, and he basically did engineering type work, although he was not an engineer. He was working with pipes mostly. But after his experiences, he developed an incredible interest in perpetual motion and did experiment and did make a few attempts at a perpetual motion type device. So even at that level, and my father was no scientist, but I want to tell you, but he was fascinated enough by his contact experiences that he did attempt to build several machines that were perpetual motion, and he did build a sculpture to contact the others with. So it is kind of it's fascinating what comes of these encounters, but sometimes they leave people entirely terrified. And I would mention this on the outside that we do know that in the United States alone, thousands upon thousands of people go missing every year with never ever being found. And if you take apart the numbers, some people fall into a hole or something like that, and others are murdered. But it does seem to me that there's a disproportionate number of missing people. So I don't know if you think that any visitors might have any hand in that.
I would imagine, I mean, statistically speaking, probably there's got to be some. There's so many missing people. But, if you look into it, a lot of these missing people, there's not been a whole lot of research into this. If they've been, previously reporting UFO experiences. For the most part, no. We've not been able to really pinpoint these missing people cases directly to UFOs in the vast majority of cases. But there are a few. I mean, there was one case that I was involved with, this gentleman I interviewed, really interesting case. He and his friends went camping out in the desert. This is here in Southern California. And they were all there in this little cabin that one of them owned. And one of the guys walks off for a couple of hours and comes back and says, "You wouldn't believe what just happened. I came upon a landed UFO." And no one believed him except, one of the guys that I ended up interviewing. Tony is his name. And Tony's like, "Well, tell me what happened." And this gentleman said, "Yeah, I came upon a landed UFO. There was kind of human-looking ETs, not totally human-looking. They were bald, they had kind of pale skin, very large, dark eyes, kind of like almost gray human hybrids." And he said that they were very friendly, invited him aboard the ship, so that they're studying the flora and the fauna in this area, and they're coming back here on a yearly basis and checking things out. And if he wanted to, he could come with them. And he said, "No, I don't think I want to go." But they said, "Well, we're going to be here next year at this exact time, so if you change your mind, we'll be here and you can meet us." And that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
They left, and the next year rolled around, and he started giving away all his items. He gave away his money, all the stuff he owned. His family became very concerned, and his friends are like, "You're not going to go meet these guys, are you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to do it. I really want to do it." And he did. He drove off, didn't come back. This guy I interviewed went out there with his family and found this guy's car with the keys still in it. No trace of this man. They had to call the police. It was a huge missing persons case. They never found him, but it seems that he was invited aboard this UFO and took the invitation.
Wow.
And was never seen again.
That is an interesting case. Why don't you mention the names of your most recent books again, just so that our listeners know where to get them and the names of them and so forth? You want to do that, Preston?
This is Preston Dennett, too.
Yes.
Dennett. I'm sure you're on Facebook or
Yes, he's on
internet. And,
Yeah. My latest book is Inside UFOs. You can get it on Amazon. I also have a website. If you just Google my name, it'll take you there. I've got a number of books I've put out recently. UFOs over Colorado. Also, Not From Here, volumes 1 and 2. I'm going to put out a third volume. Those are collections of articles I've written over the years, updated with new information. And I'm keeping busy. I've got a new book coming out this year, about underwater UFOs, USOs. Because there's a lot of activity right here off the Southern California coast. I think there might be a undersea base.
Wow.
I really do. So that's another thing I've done a lot of research into, and I'm super excited about that book. So I'm keeping busy. I love researching this stuff. I think it's a really important subject.
I do too.
I really do. I mean, some people say, UFOs don't affect me. I've never seen one. I don't really care about them. I'm like, well, you know what? They are affecting you. You just don't realize it. If we have crashed UFOs. We have the bodies. They're being held by the military. This subject is absolutely treated seriously by the upper levels of our military and our military-industrial complex. And if we could get this technology that we already have released, it would solve our energy crisis. It would solve our environmental crisis. It would solve our economic crisis.
Wow.
It would have a huge, huge effect. And the only reason it's being suppressed is because we're an oil kind of technology. The people who are in power are not going to let this stuff out as long as we're continuing to spend money on oil and things like this. Because we have free energy. We have the technology. It's there. It's going to be released. The cat's already out of the bag. The disclosure movement is not going to go backward.
Well, good.
This stuff will come out. It will.
Well, Tesla had it over 100 years ago, and J.P. Morgan famously told him, if you can't meter it, I'm not interested in it. And there was a lot of speculation that Tesla himself received a lot of this information from UFOs. And, from what you say, with the Navy engineer, perhaps Tesla was just a little bit more adroit as far as making or harnessing the power of electricity.
Yeah, he said he was in contact. He said flat out that, he thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at his experiments, and this is another thing you keep seeing again, like we talked about earlier. People are inspired to become inventors. I see this again and again. One guy, high school education, didn't do well in school. Suddenly he's making all these patents. He's super interested in electromagnetism. He's actually inventing stuff, which, again, is not unique and certainly not even uncommon. So, yeah.
Well,
another thing I've seen is people's IQ will go up.
Mm-hmm. Over and over again, over the past 100 or slightly more years, people have come up with machines, a variety of different devices, we would say, that used what would seem to be free energy, the car that works on water, the electric car, which isn't free energy, but it's approaching that. And we see over and over again the powers that be try to step on that, to squelch it. And it's really unfortunate. But I have no no option but to believe that free or almost free energy is possible, and that we have to persevere. As the one gentleman in the book, one of the Navy fellows said, that we have to, kind of persevere and believe that it can happen. Because I believe that intention, if we have the intention to do something, that we can, in fact, make it happen. And if we have the intention to, say, run a car on water, we can. But I think our next step will be some form of a hovercraft, because I've seen visions where our highways are overrun with grass, and that things are floating just above the highways, and that they just use the old highways as a sort of a route to follow, kind of thing.
Oh, I can't wait for that to happen. The traffic here in LA is just awful.
The worst in the world, I've heard. Lucky you.
Yeah. It takes me an hour just to go 10 miles.
Wow.
And there's no reason for it. We have the technology.
Yeah, but
we have this energy, and I think what the ETs are doing is basically, they've gone to the government. We have the technology. It's still not coming out, so they're going to the people. They're doing a grassroots movement type of thing. And one contactee after another is being given this information. And sooner or later, it's just going to reach a saturation point where it can't be covered up anymore.
We would like.
I think we're trending towards open official contact. I really do.
Hope so. I hope so. You had written a book about some interesting events on the Coronado Island, and we had one of our regular listeners, a gentleman named Peter, report about his incident at the big hotel there, the Del Coronado. And his experience had to do with a television that came on by itself and displayed the image of a woman who was perhaps deceased, so we would call it a ghost. And so we'd like to hear a little bit more. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to reading your book about the Coronado Island incident yet, but it will certainly be on my list of things to read. Would you like to give us just a short rundown on that, Preston?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great case. And what's amazing about this case is sort of the one I give to people if they are skeptical, because it involves not one witness, not two, not four, not even 6 or 8. It's more than that. On this one night in 1994, March 14th, I believe it was, a bunch of people had contact. And this book that I wrote focuses on 6 witnesses who were at the Village Inn. This is just down the street from the Del Coronado. Now, if you've been to Coronado Island, it's very densely populated. It's a very touristy town. It's got an enormous number of police on there. This is where the Navy SEALs do their training. It's quasi-military. The least likely place you'd ever expect for a UFO encounter. And when this encounter actually happened, President Clinton was due to visit in like 2 days and was staying actually at a house maybe a block away from where this incident occurred. So the entire island was just swimming with Secret Service. I don't know if this was a display of, what these ETs can do or what have you, but on this one night, 6 people in this one hotel were all taken, and all of them had various degrees of recall.
Wait, they
main
were
guy
taken.
interviewed
They were taken where, Preston?
into a UFO.
Oh,
They had an abduction experience
okay.
from out of their hotel room, which sounds unusual, but if you look into this, you know that these ETs can abduct people anywhere, out of moving trains, off of boats, densely populated suburbs, condos. I had one person who had an experience in the Marriott Hotel on like the 7th floor in Woodland Hills.
Oh, that's scary.
So yeah, these people all had an experience on the same night with gray-type ETs, and it's an extraordinary experience because it involves a great deal of medical evidence. It's absolute. One of the people actually had their implant removed by Dr. Roger Lear, who specialized in this. So yeah, it's a great case with an enormous amount of physical evidence and sort of the smoking gun, proving that these experiences do really happen.
Had anybody reported actually seeing this craft outside the hotel?
Only to a limited extent. They reported seeing bright lights, not actual craft, but one person was sucked up, or actually three people were sucked up out of the hotel room into a beam of light, into a craft. So they didn't see it from the outside, but they did see it on the inside.
And these people were not related to each other, not a family group?
There was one husband and wife in one room. In the second room, there was two best friends. And in the third room, these are all adjoining rooms, by the way, was another husband and wife. So, yeah, it's a really strange case. A mass abduction, I think you might call it. There's not a whole lot of them out there. Most abductions are 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 people, but 6, 7 or 8, that's almost unheard of.
Well, since the people didn't know each other beforehand, how did they sort of relate to each other and say, wow, you wouldn't believe what happened to me last night? Was this like a conversation over breakfast? Or how did they get to know that the others, or did they actually see the other people on the craft?
No, they did know each other. They were friends. All of these people were going down. Actually, and I was there. By the way, I was on Coronado Island at that time.
Oh, you were?
There was a UFO conference on that weekend, and that's why they were there. To attend this UFO conference.
Well, be careful what you wish for. Wow.
Right?
Really?
This turns up, actually, this is apparently a thing. I just had no idea. But a lot of people report encounters while attending a UFO conference, either in their hotel room or they'll run outside and like, there's a UFO outside, everyone. They're running outside and they see it. This happens quite a bit. And this happened in the Triad UFO conference in 1994 on Coronado Island.
Had they had prior experiences?
Each one did, yes, to some extent. Mike Evans, the guy I interviewed, didn't think so. He was very interested in UFOs, but he's like, no, I'm not an experiencer. But he was. And
now you are.
That actually woke him up, yeah. And after looking into it, he realized he'd been having them his entire life.
Whoa.
Kate knows that at the conference at which I first met her, which she put on in Atlantic City with Atlantic Coast UFOs, that 2 women came into that conference, would-be women. We don't know that they were really women, but there were 2 women. They were like peas in a pod. They looked exactly the same. They looked human, definitely human, but they were like twins. Maybe one of them was seemed maybe a little bit older than the other, and it's too long a story to relate entirely right now. But they were seen by others besides me. They seemed to single me out. I got a mental message, that they were going to sit down next to me at the conference, even though there was other tables where there was room for them to sit down. And sure enough, they sat down right next to me. And one of them was wearing a huge ring, like a huge ring with what looked like something, a bluish stone. Could have been an aquamarine or another blue stone. But it was quite a scary kind of experience to be in, even in a room with a couple hundred people in it.
Yeah, and not many other people remembered seeing them.
No, not everybody, but George Filer's wife saw them. And a couple of other people saw them, but they didn't notice anything unusual because they didn't interact with them. But they sort of were a little bit out of time, in the sense that their dress was that of maybe 20 years prior, like around 1980s clothing. And they kind of looked a little bit like mafia wives, is what I can say. In a certain sense, they had the same helmet haircuts, black hair or nearly black hair, helmet haircuts, dressed in the same clothing. It was odd. It was really an odd situation, and they did hone in right on me. And the first thing they said to me, "Have you seen a UFO?" And I said, "Yes. How about you?" Because I often deflect questions in that manner by, dumping the question back at the person, and they said they had, and they said they had seen the UFOs in Medford, New Jersey. Is it Medford? Medville? Medford? But it was the same town where
George Filer.
George Filer lives. And I said, "Oh, you must know George Filer then." "No, we don't." So it was a little bizarre, and it left me very unsettled for the time of the of Kate's wonderful conference that I had the privilege to attend.
Well, thank you. Well, Preston, you seem to accept the fact that these beings are alien, and they are in the sense of not being human. But do you think they actually come from a planet? What's your sense of where their origin is? Because I really suspect they come, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, Mr. Freeman, but I really have a feeling a lot of them come from here, right, from Earth, and just sort of little subsets of humanity that have managed to exist outside our existence.
Yeah, like a breakaway human civilization.
Yeah. I get that feeling somehow. It just seems either that or this is just such an incredibly attractive planet that everybody wants to come here. It's bally high of...
I have a difficult time getting away from, your standard extraterrestrial hypothesis. I think that's the theory that really best explains the evidence. And if they're not extraterrestrials, then where does that leave us? What are we? Are we the only physical beings in the universe? I highly doubt that. I think that these guys probably do have some interdimensional abilities.
Yes.
But we do too. We can go out of body.
We do.
Do the same sort of things that, they can do, perhaps not at the level of understanding that they have. But yeah, I do think these guys come from other planets, and they're building ships. They're made out of metal. I think that's a theory that I just can't get away from. I think it best explains the evidence. But they do have interdimensional abilities. There's no doubt in my mind that they're very advanced in terms of understanding the so-called other side and higher dimensions. But yeah, I still think that we're dealing with biological beings very much like us, only different. And what their origins are, well, that's a $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
They've been here forever. We know that. And just from cave paintings and Renaissance paintings. And
yes, indeed.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they've got bases here, or if some of them have evolved from here, or if we evolved from somewhere else, for that matter.
Apparently, the best remote viewer in the past, one of the best, let us say, Ingo Swann was great also, but this guy, Pat Price, he did speak about alien bases in Australia for one. He may have spoken about more than one, and I remember asking the famous physicist Hal Puthoff, who started the remote viewing program in the United States with my dear friend Russell Targ, and Hal Puthoff, when I asked him a question in public at the Remote Viewers Association, I asked him about Pat Price, who was his co-worker, really a person who he worked with a great deal. Was it true that there are alien bases around? There was one in Australia or around Australia somewhere, and he said, "Yeah, that's true. That happened. That's absolutely true." So, I don't know.
I'd be amazed if there wasn't. Just from the sheer number of encounters that people report.
Exactly.
It's a daily thing.
Yeah, well, see, that's the whole thing. If it was a mission of exploration, there'd be 5 or 6, and mission of invasion or whatever, then there's by the thousands. And yeah, I don't get the feeling that this is an invasion. a force of invasion. I mean, it just doesn't seem like that. And even though they're technologically advanced, it doesn't seem that they're sociologically that advanced either. I mean, they show a lot of human characteristics. And, certainly the tales of the old mythology and the origins of most of the religions would seem to echo what these people or what these beings are saying.
Yeah, I think they're very much like us. I mean, their behavior falls under the same sort of umbrella as human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, people were able to predict UFO sightings. Jim and Coral Lorenzen, pioneering UFO investigators,
Oh, yeah,
realized that, hey, these guys whenever there's a new technological installation built, these guys appear over it. They're actually able to predict UFO sightings by this method. And I did a study of UFOs and rockets. They're very closely watching all our technological development into space. Also, I did a study on UFOs and mines, iron mines and gold mines. And there are so many cases. There are about 20 or 30 cases where these UFOs are seen not only hovering over mines, but landing, and in some cases actually affecting these mines. So that's speaking towards them being, interested in our metals of our planet, which would mean they're building craft, and they're physical things. So I think that by and large, their behavior is very much similar to ours, and they're doing what we would probably do if we were to visit an alien race or another planet.
Well, yeah, they're saying now if you go to Mars, use the what you have there in Mars to create habitats. Rather than take it with you, just use what will be wherever you're going. So, yeah, that would make sense. And when you mention gold, then you think of Sitchin, too, right? And the Anunnaki. And that whole... he had some interesting theories, too, I would say.
And the old gold mines in Africa.
Africa and all.
All those, kind of almost prehistoric gold mines that were there.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting connection.
Oh, very, very.
Well, Preston, I want to thank you very, very much for being with us this afternoon. And I hope that you will continue to keep writing and continue to keep letting us know about what it is you're writing about, because we certainly like to stay in touch with you. And once again, we have been speaking to Preston Dennett and discussed primarily his book, Inside UFOs, The True Accounts of Contact, which I recommend highly. And I want to get myself a copy somewhere along the line of, I'm looking for the name of it here. Oh boy. The Coronado Island UFO Incident. Because I want to find out what that was about.
Okay.
A little bit more.
Good.
So thanks so much, Preston.
And Preston, it's been great talking to you again, too. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. And I really enjoyed talking with you guys, and really appreciate you guys having me on the show. And we'll definitely have to do it again.
Okay. Speak to you soon.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah,
that
it was
really
great.
interesting.
Yeah.
And just want to mention that next time on Shattered Reality Podcast, which I think will be our show number 63, we are going to have Julie Beischel, Dr. Julie Beischel, who, like many of our guests, is a prominent Society for Scientific Exploration member. And she is... She, along with her husband, Mark, they started the Windbridge Institute that has now morphed into a nonprofit organization called, I believe, the Windbridge Organization, ORG. And we will be speaking to her about mediumship and the kind of scientific verification that she has studied and experimented with mediums, and what she's up to with it right now. And this is I think it's going to be a very interesting show, and it's on a different scope than what we've been covering lately.
Different topic, too.
Yes.
I don't think we've done that.
Okay.
Okay.
So Now, let's do it.
Say
Goodbye from Shattered Reality.